Welcome to MJJ Taylor Short Stories. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share for more scary stories. Every town has its secrets, whispers carried on the wind like dust. Our town, Oak Haven, was no different. But our secret was no mere whisper. It was a blight on the land, an ancient rot at the very edge of the old-growth forest. The Blackwood property was home to the usual broken windows and splintered wood, but it was the well in the overgrown yard that truly haunted us. Locals called it the Echoing Well, but no one dared speak its real name. It started, as most bad ideas do, with a dare. It was a Friday night, the kind of night where the air was thick with boredom and the promise of a story to tell later. Maya, always the thrill seeker, smirked and said, "I bet none of you would spend an hour by the Echoing Well." A lone Ben, ever the skeptic, scoffed. But me, I felt a strange, cold pull, an insatiable curiosity that felt less like my own desire and more like a command. My name is Alex, and I was being summoned. The path to Blackwood was a tunnel of gnarled branches, and the air grew colder with every step. I choked on a gust of wind that reeked of grave dirt and stagnant water. When the well finally loomed into view, it was more than just a stone pit. It was a presence. The rusted iron lid looked less like a cover and more like a seal. It was a heavy, ancient weight on the earth, and I felt a sickness in my gut just standing near it. With trembling hands, I forced myself to open the lid. The shriek of metal fused with decades of rust was a sound of protest. A gust of fetid, icy air rushed up from the depths, and with it came a sound. Not a singular splash from the stone I dropped, but a choir of screams, overlapping, distant, and yet so terribly close. I pressed my ear to the opening, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and the whispers became words. They spoke in a language I didn't know, but their meaning was clear. Names, so many names, tumbling over each other in a cacophony of agony. And then a single voice rose above the rest, clear and sharp. It was my mother's voice telling me to get out. My blood ran to ice. I forced myself to look down, my flashlight's beam struggling to cut through the oppressive darkness. And there, in the perfectly still, black water at the bottom, were dozens of faces staring back. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths wide in silent screams. And I recognized them all. The missing hikers, the children who vanished a generation ago, the old man who disappeared on his way to the market. Their faces were preserved in that eternal liquid tomb, their eyes fixed on me, begging me for something I couldn't understand. Panic seized me, but before I could run, a low, guttural growl rumbled up from the well. I forced myself to look back, and in the beam of my flashlight, I saw them. Long, wet, and white with the sickly pallor of something that has never seen the sun. Fingers like gnarled roots, tipped with nails like shattered glass. Two skeletal, mud-caked hands began to grip the rough stone rim of the well. The sound of them dragging against the rock, a sickening wet scrape. But they were not attached to arms. A form began to pull itself from the well. Not a person, not even a skeleton. It was a twisting, amorphous mass of limbs and slick, pale flesh, its joints bending at impossible angles, its body contorting like a sack full of broken glass. It moved with a terrible, slow deliberation, each movement accompanied by a sound like cracking knuckles and a wet cough. I screamed, a raw sound of pure terror, and dropped my flashlight. It rolled away, casting a frantic, dancing light on the twisted thing as it began to crawl toward me. I ran. I didn't look back, but the sound of it followed me. A wet squelch, squelch, squelch of its body dragging itself across the ground. I felt its cold breath on my neck, heard its rasping breath just inches away. I stumbled, fell, and as I scrambled to my feet, a searing, icy grip closed around my ankle. I didn't look. I just screamed, kicking and pulling until my skin ripped free, leaving a layer of mud and something else behind. I burst out of the woods gasping, collapsing on the dirt road, the Blackwood property a dark silhouette behind me. They don't believe me, of course. They think the scratches on my ankle were from a fall, but the mud from its fingers, caked on my skin, won't wash off. It's not mud. It's a permanent stain, a brand of rotten earth and dead flesh. And in the quiet moments, I don't just hear the wells echo anymore. I hear the other voices whispering, telling me it's lonely down there. They tell me it's waiting for me to join them. The, ce- the cellar. The house stood on a rise, a squat, gray thing with peeling paint and a perpetual frown of a roofline. It had been empty for a decade, ever since old Mr. Alistair passed away. Everyone in town knew the story. He was a quiet man, a widower who kept to himself. But after his death, they found his journals. They weren't about his life, but about the things he saw, the things he kept caged in his basement. My friends and I, Jess, Liam, and I, Mark, thought it was just a morbid story, a small-town legend to give the kids something to do. The dare was simple enough. Spend an hour in Alistair's cellar and get $100 each. $100 for an hour of our time seemed worth a few ghost stories. The cellar door was in the pantry, a heavy, unpainted slab of wood with a rusted iron handle. It was so cold down there, the air hurt to breathe. We descended the creaking stairs, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the oppressive blackness, illuminating a space smaller than we expected. It was just a single room, dirt-floored, with stone walls that glistened with a sickly sheen. The air didn't just feel cold, it felt heavy, like a weight on your chest. We set up our camp, just three of us huddled in the center of the room, our flashlights pointed at each other. Liam, always the nervous one, kept looking at the far wall. "What are those?" he whispered, his voice shaking. I followed his gaze. Etched into the stone were dozens of lines. They weren't carved. They looked like they had been gouged out by something. Long, deep, parallel lines, claw marks. Some of them were so deep they seemed to have gone right through the stone. "Probably just some kid," Jess said, her voice trying for bravado, but her eyes were wide. Then we heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from the wall opposite the marks. Scrape, scrape. It was too slow to be a rat, too rhythmic. It sounded like a nail being dragged across a blackboard, only 1,000 times closer, 1,000 times worse. Liam grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "It's coming from inside the wall," he hissed. The scraping stopped, replaced by a low, wet thump, and another, and another. The sounds moved slowly and methodically across the far wall, then the next, and the next, circling us. Thump, 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 like something was crawling within the stone, a thing without joints or bones. Suddenly a new sound came, and it was the one that broke us. A deep, wet gurgle, followed by a series of choked, rasping breaths. It was a sound that should not exist. It was a sound of immense suffering, of something breathing where it shouldn't be. The breathing came from a corner of the room, and as my flashlight swept over it, the light caught on a crack in the stone wall, a crack no wider than a finger. And from that crack, a thick, black fluid began to seep, glistening and viscous, with a smell that made us gag. The fluid pulsed, slowly spreading, as if it had a life of its own. Liam screamed, a high, terrified shriek. "It's what's in his journals!" The thing without shape, the ever-hungry slime. We bolted for the stairs, tripping over each other in the dark. As I scrambled up, I heard a terrible sound from behind me, a new noise, a high-pitched, wet slurp, as if the liquid was forming, concentrating. I scrambled through the cellar door and slammed it shut, just as Jess and Liam collapsed outside. We didn't say a word. We just ran, and we didn't stop until we were far from that house. That was a year ago. We never went back. But sometimes when I'm alone in my room late at night, I hear a sound. A quiet, familiar sound. Scrape, scrape. And I know it's coming from inside the wall. I know it's getting closer. And I know that the walls of a house, no matter how thick, are no match for something that wants to get out.